The great state of Michigan is minting news these days. This week, for instance, there's a new petition drive to recall the state's Republican governor, Rick Snyder. The language on the petitions got approved on Monday, so people can now start signing those petitions if they want Governor Snyder recalled from office. This is try number 2 against Governor Rick Snyder. Putting officials in Michigan up for a recall is really kind of a hard thing to do. It's a very high threshold you've got to cross. Also this week, Governor Snyder is getting ready to appoint yet another emergency manager, this time to bypass the officials elected locally and instead just unilaterally take over a school board in Muskegon Heights, which is right there on the eastern shore of Lake Michigan. So now the state will take over and appoint a single unelected overseer with the power to do just about anything, from canceling union contracts to canceling any other kind of contracts to stripping power from the elected school board to maybe dissolving the whole district if he or she wants to. They get to do whatever they want. Because this is how Michigan rolls now. In Michigan now, democracy is not a way we solve problems. Democracy is a problem itself that has to be got around. The Republicans are in full control of the state of Michigan since the 2010 elections. And their expanded emergency manager law is not about democracy, not at all. But do you want to see something in Michigan that is about democracy? These boxes contain a couple of 100,000 signatures that were gathered to try to overturn that radical emergency manager law. Just as some people are trying to put Governor Rick Snyder on the ballot for recall, even though that is really hard to do in Michigan, organizers are also trying to put the emergency manager law on the ballot in November as well. They want to put it up for a citizens' repeal. On the last day of February, they caravanned to the state capitol, to Lansing, and they delivered 50 boxes of signed petitions to the Board of State Canvassers. The petitions included roughly 60,000 more signatures than they need to get this thing on the ballot. The Board of State Canvassers has been counting and verifying the signatures ever since, and it looks now like the canvassers are close to finishing up. Now, here's the really, really interesting part. In Michigan, you are allowed to try to block a petition drive. You can make a formal legal challenge saying that the petition itself is flawed somehow, and so whatever that petition wants done shouldn't be allowed to go forward. This Board of State Canvassers is the board that makes decisions on challenges like that. They set a deadline for challenging this petition against the emergency manager law, a deadline of this past Monday, April 9th at 5 p.m. And get this, at 4:08 p.m., with 52 minutes to go before the deadline, a challenge to that petition against the emergency manager law indeed came in. A group calling itself Citizens for Fiscal Responsibility filed this brief against the petitions, against the emergency manager law. They say no matter how many names are on that petition, the emergency manager law cannot be put on the ballot for recall in Michigan. And why do they say that is? What is the problem with the petition that they put at the top of their list? Quote, "The font size of the heading is significantly smaller than is required by Michigan election law." Seriously? Really? Seriously, really. The font size of the heading is too small. As someone commented on our blog this week, if they really are Citizens for Fiscal Responsibility, you might think they'd like a smaller font because you would save money on ink and paper. For the record, the people who circulated the petition told us today that they stand by their work. They say that the folks who printed the petition have assured them that the font is the right legal size. But not according to this group, Citizens for Fiscal Responsibility. Their spokesman, Bob LeBrant, told reporters, quote, "They've gone to all of the time and expense of the petition drive only to blow it with the wrong font size." So you better not take this democracy thing too far. It takes lots of time, and it's got lots of rules, and you might blow it. Continuing from the Detroit News, Mr. LeBrant is senior counsel at the Sterling Corporation, a Lansing-based firm that primarily works on Republican causes. And in fact, if you look at Citizens for Fiscal Responsibility's filing papers with the state, you'll see that the address and phone number for this Citizens Fiscal Responsibility thing are the exact same address and phone number as the Sterling Corporation, this Republican political consulting firm. According to its own filings with the state, Citizens for Fiscal Responsibility lives inside this Republican firm. Same street address, same suite. You call the Citizens number and they answer the phone. Sterling Corporation. It's the same thing, right? I don't know how big the Sterling Corporation is exactly. On their website, they list 7 people, including their senior counsel, the one who was fussing about the font size, the one who says the Board of State Canvassers should throw out this entire petition drive to recall the emergency law. Above his name, Sterling lists 3 partners in the firm. One of them, Jeff Timmer, happens to be the former executive director of the Michigan Republican Party. And hey, look what else is in his bio. Look at this. His name is Jeff Timmer, and he also serves on the Michigan Board of State Canvassers. That same board that's now going to be deciding whether the font's too small on these petitions to overturn the emergency manager law, which his colleague back at his own consulting firm is asking for. So this guy is like the pitcher, and he's also the umpire at the same time. You've got Citizens for Fiscal Responsibility challenging the petitions from inside a Republican consulting firm and getting represented by the senior counsel for that Republican firm, while one of the firm's partners serves on the board that's going to impartially decide whether Citizens for Fiscal Responsibility gets to stop this act of democracy in Michigan because they say the font on the petition is a hair too small. On its website, Sterling Corporation talks itself up this way. It says, quote, Sterling blends aggressive campaign-oriented tactics, unique understanding of voter attitudes, and influential relationships with government decision-makers, political leaders, donors, and opinion influencers to produce big victories. Big victories. We have called and written to Jeff Timmer, who, of course, is both a Republican strategist and a government decision-maker now. We have asked him about the apparent conflict in this case between these 2 roles. We have asked him whether he will recuse himself from this decision. We have not heard back from him yet. The Republican Michigan Secretary of State says it is Mr. Timmer's call alone as to whether he does have a conflict of interest here. He gets to decide. Earlier this week, I said that the news in Michigan keeps getting more interesting and more fraught all the time. I did not expect to be reporting on Michigan again so soon with a news story this confounding about Michigan politics. But I have to ask again, and I will keep asking, what's going on in Michigan? And why isn't what's going on in Michigan bigger national news, given what a freaking mess it seems to be?
The Rachel Maddow Show, weeknights at 9 Eastern on MSNBC.